everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and on this day, I have with me a gentleman by the name of Davenport. He is the owner of Better Day, Better You Counseling and Consulting Services. He has spent the last 17 years in the Department of Juvenile Justice Service, providing individual, group, and family therapy services. A concept, a topic that is very near and dear to me. So I am so looking forward to today's conversation. But first and foremost, Mr. Davenport, as I always do, I'd like to take a quick moment to pause, say thank you for making time for me today. Time is a gift. Once we give it, we cannot give it back. So I appreciate you carving out this space in your day for me today. And with that, sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, sir, just as it's uncommon to see a brother as a teacher in the educational system, it is also uncommon to see a brother who is in the mental health field. So I'm curious for you in your journey, what sparked the interest? How did you start this pathway to become the man that we see today?
A lot of soul searching and self-evaluation and growing. When I first started pursuing this, actually, I didn't know that I would be a minority in this field. It didn't dawn on me. That part more so, I was so focused on what I wanted to do, and then I met one of my near dear late friends who's no longer with us. He told me, he said, "You should be a therapist," and I was like, "Nah," and he's like, "Yeah, you should be a therapist." And so things happened, and I ended up going to grad school. Um, um, and just once I got there, it was like, okay, I was a little older by the time I got to grad school, but it was like, oh, I like this. I
Mm.
like what I'm doing, and really had an opportunity to. Grad school made an impact on me, and then once they made us go to therapy as part of our graduate program, I was like, wow,
Mm.
I want to do this. I believe I can do this. I believe this is where I am. So um, got out and realized that I also wanted to work with youth who probably wouldn't have an opportunity to have access to a good therapist,
Mhm.
especially a therapist who looks like me. So I was like, okay, this is where I am. So this brought me to where I am today, and really pursuing and working with our young people, especially our African American males, um,
Awesome.
and to really make sure that they have adequate mental health services.
Much needed, much needed, much needed. Now, you've been at this for a year or two, we're going to say, but
Hmm.
quite a while you've been at this.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious when it comes to the Black community, as I lovingly like to say, your cousins on your mama's side.
Hmm.
Um, when it comes to the Black community, what misconceptions have you encountered when it comes to mental health and therapy? What have you noticed amongst us?
I've encountered that if I see a therapist, it must be crazy.
Mhm.
Um, it's people are gonna I'm gonna be embarrassed. I'm probably gonna lose. I've even had people say, especially in our community, um, "Do you have to tell my job about this because I don't want to lose my job?" And because looking at the fact that, oh, you're seeing a therapist, you can't work here anymore.
Oh, I see.
And I have to go through I've learned now that when I get clients, I just explain to them from the beginning of what I do, what therapy is, what the process looks like. But yeah, a lot of people come in and say, who do you talk to? Are you going to talk to my family?
Mm.
Are you going to diagnose me? And I explain to them how diagnosing works and how diagnosis work. Uh, I'm more focused on the process than the diagnosis. If the diagnosis and if there's a significant problem, of course, we work through that. But I tell them the diagnosis is their diagnosis. It's not something to be embarrassed about. It's not something that's going to be detrimental to them. So we talk a lot of education at the beginning of the process for working with clients. But yeah, a lot of misconceptions coming in. I'm going to be crazy. Are you going to pick my brain? Are you going to do some Jedi mind tricks? All
Mhm.
those things that come in, and we start talking about the therapeutic process. And I say, no, that's not where we are. We're going to talk about this in terms of you run therapy, you basically guide and control. I'm going to press you on some issues, but for the most part, this isn't to be an unpleasant experience.
Awesome. That's interesting. I would have thought that most people would have understood that there's the issue of confidentiality. So for people to come to you and think that you're going to tell their job or something like that, that's interesting that people are not understanding that, just like your medical, your doctor for your physical or something like that, mental health professionals are still under the same guidelines they have to follow. It's interesting.
Yes,
Interesting.
yes, and confidentiality, and yeah, that's the other part, explaining what confidentiality really means, and even down to um, the only way someone's going to know about this or circumstances that probably won't happen, but also if you would like to have me share this, you have to sign off saying I consent to that.
Okay.
So we talked about informed consent as well.
Okay. So now you've explained on your end as a therapist what you have to do. But a lot of times, especially today I'm 22, I'm starting to hear more people, say things like, I go to therapy, or, my therapist this. So it's kind of shifting a little bit and becoming
Hmm.
almost chic, like a Gucci bag
Hmm.
or a Louis Vuitton bag. Oh, I go see my
Hmm.
therapist. But I don't think, sometimes when I hear that, I don't think
Hmm.
people are actually doing the work or understanding what the whole process is about. So as a therapist or somebody who offers mental health services, what does the client have to do to be proactive and equally engaged and provide in achieving a positive outcome in therapy?
Myself and my colleagues will tell clients, and when they come in, this is not going to be us sitting and chatting and chuckling. There's real work. The real work happens outside of therapy,
Mhm.
and holding yourself accountable and having a therapist who will hold you accountable when you come back in, and say, okay, let's talk about the homework I assigned to you. And yes, there's homework in
Homework,
therapy.
homework. I got
There is
homework.
there is there is homework in there. Yeah, there is homework in therapy. And to go out there and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to challenge you today to sit down and really actively listen to your partner during a conversation, and then you're going to report out on what you heard and how you felt, and come
Okay.
back in. A lot of clients will say, well, I'm really having a hard time really sitting there, and we'll talk about the parts there. But for people who come and say, you know what, hey, I didn't do the homework part, and you got one time with me, and then the second time you come back in, if you're not actively involved in the therapeutic process, then I will ask you a question to say, do you want to be here? Because I can table you. You can come back when you're ready, or you can commit to doing this now.
Okay.
I don't play with that part, because I don't want to just sit and take your money and just sit with. No, I want you to get better, because the whole process is for you to get better,
Okay.
and to get better in, we don't have a fixed amount of time, but you know what? I don't want you sitting in therapy for 3 years and we're still talking about the same problem.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
not that's not how that works. So yeah, um, when you come in, expect to do the work.
Okay.
Expect to challenge yourself. Expect to be held accountable.
Okay. So I'm just not going to go sit into the chair and you tell me everything and I have no work to do. That you're not Mr. Fix It guy.
Oh no, you working on you. I'm
Okay.
the guide. We
Hmm.
we are. I am the guide. I am the the sometimes the hand holder, but most times this is going to be whatever my role is for that particular client. I'm going to work within that role, but we also know that that client is going to do the work as well. And my clients will, my clients have learned real fast that if they come into the session and we're still talking about, okay, well, yeah, I know we said we weren't going to call her again, but I decided to break down and just call her to see how she was doing. And I said, okay, cool. So let's talk about that, because that shows that pretty much when we go back to certain places, you know what, we need to do more work surrounding those
Mm,
things. So yeah, accountability and responsibility is also part of that therapeutic process.
okay. Okay. Great. Great. Now I wanted segue and talk for a quick minute about the concept of multicultural counseling.
Hmm.
And I want to frame it as a scenario. It's kind of a
Hmm.
spin on what is that joke? A guy walks into a bar. Okay. But so let's say you have a black guy walks into a therapist's office.
Okay.
And let's say the brother, he's angry, he's depressed, he's frustrated because on his job he's been passed over for a promotion a few times by white colleagues who are
Hmm.
not as qualified. Let's add to
Hmm.
the mix, he has a significant other at home who's also black, and
Hmm.
there's friction there because the money's funny, the finances, because he hasn't been able to secure the promotion.
Hmm.
Let's add some kids into this. So maybe there's some sons or daughters who are starting to
Hmm.
express he's emotionally unavailable. So he walks
Hmm.
into the therapist's office, and the therapist is white and female. What are the odds that this therapist will be effective in coping with his issues?
I'm going to say, starting out, there's a 50-50 chance.
Mm.
And I say that because a lot of Black males will come back and report to me that after they've gone to other therapists, when they've walked into those offices and sat down, and they were immediately put, well, why are you so angry? Maybe, and not really
Mm.
listening to what's really going on, but going into, you're angry, or, you don't, and a lot of them don't feel comfortable in that situation because they'll say, well, this immediately became uncomfortable versus me being able to sit and talk about something. And it's already hard for us to sit down as a black man to sit and express ourselves emotionally. And then in the mix to have somebody who's already looking at us the way we were fearing that people were going to look at us when we
Mhm.
sat down in that office. So we talk about cultural humility. Cultural
Okay.
humility is to, you see the person in front of you, um, let them tell their story, let them weave their tapestry,
Okay.
versus you creating something in your head already that sort of falls into stereotypes, or sort of falls into something that basically is detrimental to the, talking with the client. So we cultural competency and cultural humility go together, allowing people to go through and really tell their tale.
Mhm.
And there's some that really get it, and then there's some that it's it's the box has already been placed around the client, and the client's angry, the client is blaming, all these other things, and not really listening to what's really going on. The key to that is, this is a blank slate. I
Mm.
can't I can't already pre-write somebody's story who's walking into my office. That's a blank slate. When they
Oh.
sit down and we start talking about what's going on, and they start telling what, where they are, for me to really understand and see how I can help them. Um, that's the difference there. Also, being able to understand, I'm angry, I'm tired, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with that. As a black man, walking into, I can understand. I see where you're
Mhm.
coming from, and I'm going to listen. So there are white therapists out there who are good at being able to put that aside, put the bias aside,
Gotcha.
and listen. And then there's some people who are, this is this is why we have problems.
Okay. Okay. Now, I guess maybe I want to ask to spin on that,
Hmm.
especially as a Black man, when it comes to seeking a therapist, what boxes should you be checking off as to what I'm looking for?
Um, it's like we as therapists, we have our profiles online.
Mhm.
Somewhere you can find a profile. Somewhere you can find, you can look at references, everything else.
Mhm.
Um, what does that person specialize in? How long have they been practicing?
Okay.
Um, where are they located? And age gap sometimes. Sometimes that, significant, sometimes it's not. But ultimately it's going to come down to what how do you feel when you sit down in that chair in front of that person? And I always tell clients, we can have this first session and you can say, you're cool, but you're not the therapist for me.
Mm.
I would not take it offense. I would not take it personally. I'll be fine. I will understand. So being able to figure that part out
Okay. Okay. Okay.
and asking lots of questions.
And
That's
I
kind of
think, not to cut you off, I hate to cut you off. I think the whole concept of sitting down in a therapist chair is so stressful. People don't even know how to ask questions or what questions to ask. They're just like, oh my God, this person's about to get in my head and they're going to say this about me. They're going to think this about me. So I think a lot of people might step into a therapist's office and not even know
hmm
what to ask. So,
and the same concept with a PCP. A doc,
mhm.
when I go in, my doctor found out that a lot of questions. He was like, I was asking a whole lot of questions, and he was like, okay, and I was like, yeah. So before you sit down, I would say, I try to do my due diligence. Um, tell people, write your questions down before you come in that you're going to
Okay.
have for me, because I'm going to do this, and then
Mhm.
over the process, I'll make a decision sometimes and say, I think you'll be better served by another person, and
Okay.
I'll refer you. I'll continue to see you until I refer you until we find a person that will be suitable for you. So that's vice versa as well. If I
Okay.
may not be the person for them, they may not be the person that needs me.
Okay. Okay. Got you. Got you. Now let me go back to the little scenario that I posed,
hmm
and I kind of break that down a little bit. Um,
hmm
so we understand that we have issues with race that we're still continuing to deal with, but in that dynamic, I want to talk about the significant other,
hmm
couples, husband and wife, and
hmm
more specific than that, the current times issues that we're dealing with, and that is the pandemic.
hmm
You personally, in your practice, what you do, what have you noticed struggles with couples when it comes to this pandemic and the pressures and us kind of navigating? And I'm stuck looking at you, you looking at me, and I mean, we're all here together. How has that affected interpersonal relationships, marriages, and couples and relationships?
I work with couples who it actually they were so tired of being together the whole time, and so but they didn't know how to talk to each other about it. So it
Oh,
was like, because there was always a buffer. Work was a buffer. Work was
yes.
an 8 hour, 16 hour, 12 hour buffer, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and now we're working from home. So I talk, especially with men who were saying, well, um, I don't know how much I can really share with my partner, because there are things in which I want to talk about, but I don't think they will receive them.
Oh.
And I I go back into asking questions like, so what's really going on here? We talk about trust, we talk about safety, and it's like, okay, emotional safety and trust in that. But as far as the pandemic is concerned, yeah, you have a lot of your parenting, working, and everything else, and everything just kind of became so enmeshed. There was no
Mm-hmm.
separation. So what we talked about, what I've worked with as far as clients who are definitely feeling that was, um, you can still have date night. You can still do things. You have to plan it out. You have to be
Mm-hmm.
more vigilant. But when you do that, becomes more of a thing. Me time, because
Mm-hmm.
you had me time without really thinking about it. Me time became a little bit different. It wasn't selfish, but it was more so that 30 minutes, that hour that you had to just do you and then come back. And then to really start talking about, uh, emotional safety and trust in reference to how you communicate with the person. And I go back to say there had to be some trust there because you married this person,
Thank
or you're
you.
living with this, or you have a child with these,
Mhm.
so there has to be some trust there as far as that. So we start talking about, how do you begin to really go back into having talks, and having talks where they're more meaningful versus surface, and being able to express yourself. And
Mhm.
what I found is that uh, men are willing to do that, to work that out. It just needed to be a guidebook, or I call it the plan written out as far as how we approach this and talk about it. And I can't tell you how many couples that I have given homework to. You're going to go on a date, and you would think that happens with married couples. Who are, we have no, you weren't having date nights. You're going to go on a date. I want you to take your wife on a date. I want you to plan it out, and for men to go through and say they came back and report, I planned out the whole date. She was really surprised. We had a good conversation about certain things. And I was like, yeah. So, and I would ask questions like, I never assumed, like, how many dates have you planned? Well, usually she's the planner, and I just kind of go along with that. But I said, okay, cool. So we're going to switch that narrative up, and then creating conversations. Pillow talk,
Mhm.
that's a thing. It coming back to being a thing. During the pandemic, I think people were just so exhausted, they just kind of flopped and went to work,
Mhm.
um, logged off, and then we're just at home, and really doing that. So I encourage pillow talk. It was like, hey, you know what? And it was like, what do we talk about? Talk about what you like. Talk about
Mhm.
what you want. How that feel. Ask those questions, especially as far as how did that feel, and what does that mean to you, and things of that nature. So really improving communication to really go through and say, making sure that there's more of that there,
Awesome.
as far as what's going on. And then the hard part was that when we're getting to that, we're during the pandemic, men were just as scared as women in reference to, how is my job going to be affected? What's going on?
Gotcha.
I just lost my job. What are we going to do? And
Gotcha.
so not coming into saying, hey, if you're going to be open and honest, you know, about the good things, and you open and honest about the things that really bother you. So
Mhm.
really pushing that conversation there to say, I want you to be open enough to talk about something that's bothering you in reference to, hey, I've lost my livelihood. What are we going to do? This scares me.
Mhm. I mean, and there's so much pressure on men to, kind of lead the path and lead the way. So
Mhm,
when you have, the rug just kind of, pulled from under you, and you're still,
mhm,
trying to deal with your concepts of, I'm the man here, I'm supposed to be able to take care of this. I can only
mhm,
assume that that is extra emotional pressure in the household, especially during these times, about how do I tell my wife and kids, I'm not really sure what we're going to do, but I have to look like
mhm,
I know what we're going to do. And, I mean, I can only imagine. I always tell people I'm not a
mhm,
man. I don't play one. I don't pretend to play one. I don't,
mhm.
but I can fathom the baggage that it must be, the weight that it must be.
Yeah, it was a lot. What I found is it was a lot there to just say this was, and I've worked with men who were um, just trying to figure it out, and
Mm,
then as things got better, um, it was still in the back of their minds, like, so what do we do? And how does this work? So talking about communication, and one of during one of my one of the sessions with one of the guys I worked with, um, he said, "Well, my wife wants to thank you," and I was like, "Oh wow," you
mm,
know. He said, "My wife wants to thank you." He said because he says she has found more out about me than the whole time we were dating. And I was like, wow. And he was like, I didn't realize how much I held back. because I just felt like there were things that, she wouldn't find appealing. And she was like, wow, that's, that really is, something else. So, things like that to come in and be able to talk about it and say, hey, this is where we are.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, those conversations have those tough conversations, especially being able to have the tough conversations, sit and listen. And then I tell couples, I say, you're a team.
Mhm.
You're your team. So if that's going to be the case, then the team has to make a decision.
That's
And
true.
I love it when I had a guy another guy I was working with. He would when he had to make tough decisions, he would say, "Well, my wife said." I said, "Oh no, we're gonna stop doing that." He would say, "Well," I said, "Your wife didn't say that." I said, "You're a team."
Mhm.
So he went back in and he's started to rearrange the verbiage. We don't want to do that. We like
Mhm.
to do this, or
Awesome.
I made a decision based for our family, but I discussed it with my wife, and this is where we are.
Awesome. It is so amazing um, when it comes to this concept of communication, that men and women as couples, we're still struggling because you can hear your grandparents, your great grandparents, your great 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 grandparents, it have always talked about, oh, he just don't talk, he just don't talk, he just don't talk. It's like, when are we going to get a handle on this communication thing? Like, this has been just ongoing.
Hmm.
Well, hopefully with some therapy, because it's a new day, it's a new generation, it's a new era. So hopefully things are going to start to shift, hopefully. But you
Hmm.
guys just don't want to talk. You don't want to talk. So, sir, you are a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated.
Yes,
Okay. And
yes.
I have always believed that men need to find a space where men can just be men and be amongst yourselves and be in groups together. But I'm not a man, like I said, I don't play
Hmm.
one, and I'm especially not a black man. So I don't think I've ever been able to fully emotionally express the benefits of why you guys need a safe space for just you guys to be together. So I have you, and I have you, and you're in the mental health field. So could you explain why it's so important for brothers to have their own space, groups, to fellowship, to bond, to connect, and all of that?
I work with Black Men Heal, which is a on virtual safe space for Black men,
Mhm.
based out of Philadelphia. Um, and I've been working with them actually since the pandemic started. It was one of the things in which I was like, I caught it just by chance, and it's it's been phenomenal as far as for those men who were disconnected from being able to come in, and they have different speakers and different subjects, different topics every week, and to come in and be able to listen and express and see how this different men from different our guys from different backgrounds have been affected by life. And it's important because a lot of times we don't get that. We don't get to raise our voice and say this is where we are. We
Mhm.
don't get to talk about the things that affect our community. um, and it's more than just talking about who got shot today and who robbed who, and it's actually meaningful conversations and topics about life in general, what goes on from our perspective, and really looking at that. And usually there is an in-house therapist on the virtual group
So
to give perspective there.
awesome, awesome.
I also work with local Black men's group called Cut to the Chase,
Mhm.
and same concept. We just started meeting in person again this year. Very small group, but to go in and talk about things that from that perspective. And usually I am the resident therapist, to sit and just give my perspective as far as within that. But we talk about things that um, when the guys leave and the guys go their separate ways, they say, you know what, I really felt like I was connected to people who were good people and was able to sit and be heard
Oh,
and not be judged and not feel as though, someone's misunderstanding me. So
okay.
the benefits have been, I mean, I'm still amazed when I sit in on both of these groups with our guys and to listen to what they walk away with.
Mhm. So even as a brother gets to adulthood, 40s and 50s, there's still this issue as a Black man with feeling like you're being heard without being passed judgment. It's still an
Hmm.
ongoing process of you.
Yes.
Okay, okay. And I feel like as your counterparts, your significant others, that's something that we should be assisting you guys with, helping you feel like I I'm creating a safe space. I want to hear you. I mean, it's part of why I do what I do. I want to hear what you got to say. I want to provide a safe space, but we need to be more proactive about it and come to a place where we understand what we have, how we interplay with each other, and how we can assist each other. So
Yes.
hopefully we do. I have one more question, I think, dear, maybe two
Okay.
before I get out of here.
Okay.
Um, if I read correctly, you grew up in Virginia, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and like we were discussing, we're just a few years apart. I was born in North Carolina. So we're both coming from Southern backgrounds. We're both in the same age bracket.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of us in our age bracket in the Black community are starting to do the mental health work to kind of let go of generations of dysfunctional
Hmm.
belief systems, behaviors that have been passed down to us. A lot of us are doing the work. But as we're doing the work and trying to process what's going on with us, many of us are turning to the previous generations, parents,
Hmm.
grandparents, and saying, hey, I'm trying to mentally unpack some stuff. Can we sit down and talk? But our elders, Mr. Davenport, because they
Hmm.
hold on to different belief systems, we don't talk about that. That's just the way it was. I'm not going. So it creates a problem because we want to kind of heal. They don't want to discuss it. So where do we get to some sort of middle ground and say, I'm trying to get better, but my folks don't want to, they don't want to even discuss, hey, that went on and this went on. And how do we get some middle ground here?
Patience. And I say patience because my mom was one of those people for a
Oh,
long time.
mhm.
And what I've learned over the years is my mom started releasing a lot of that. And now she's talked about a lot of things. And it's made me really connect with her more, but
Okay.
also feel like, wow, I wish, she didn't have to hold on to a lot of this stuff that she's held on to. So it's been interesting seeing her release a lot of these things as she's gotten older, but I also it's helped me develop an understanding of why I feel the way I feel about certain things and why when I
Mm,
push myself to walk away from this tradition of stuff that was holding me back, it's been so hard, but it's been so freeing. It's just been super freeing to say I don't have to deal with that anymore. I'm okay. And
mm,
so it's I say patience because you know it'll come. People
mm.
will tell things, people tell their story in their own time as far as why things are the way they are. And then two, you have to be willing to listen and not say, well, you should never have done that, or why would this happen? And understand that our parents and grandparents grew up in a much different time. And our parents and grandparents did what they needed to do that. I
Mm,
call it um, coming out of survival mode
mhm.
because a lot of people were still in survival mode. We just have to get through this day, because tomorrow may look different, and you don't know. Hey, if someone's going to show up on my doorstep and try to take me out of the house,
Mhm.
or if something's going to happen where I'm not going to be guaranteed justice, versus now we expect more.
Mhm.
So um, I like patience, I like listening,
Mhm.
and I like pretty much um, being empathetic
Gotcha.
surrounding that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things that have historically happened in the Black community that collectively we've not come to terms with. Coming out of enslavement and 400 years of that dysfunction, and they just say, hey, you're free, without unpacking, giving us mental health therapy to unpack all of that. I mean, even in more recent times, you see across the nation where, a lot of us were having like public housing, and them shutting down public housing and relocating people. So you have years of being, in one area. Now I'm here and not giving you any mental health issues to, unpack all of that. But, that's one of the
Hmm.
things that we've just really struggled with, given services, mental services, to kind of deal with the dynamics that we're in. And they're just like, hey, just, go ahead and wing it. And I think it's just really detrimental. And then we don't want to even cope with the fact that we do need some help. They did some studies of some kids in the projects in Los Angeles and said they have PTSD levels as high as soldiers in Afghanistan. And I think collectively as a community, we have to really understand the mental weight we're carrying around. And you can't be quiet about that. You really cannot just be sweep that under the rug.
I agree. I do agree, and it's something. When I tell people where I grew up here in Richmond, um, is we grew up in the project. We lived there. We lived there for 13 years, and in that 13 years, it was like, oh, I've seen all these things. I was expected to just kind of keep going past that, and it wasn't until 2007 when I went to therapy, um, that I unpacked a lot of that. It was
Mhm.
still with me, and didn't realize how it affected my behavior, even down to the places I lived, and how my relationships, and how I dealt with people. And the light bulb went off. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, that has a significant effect. So if it's affected me 20 years later, these kids, oh my.
Mhm. Indeed, indeed. And I think that's why a lot of times, especially our young Black
Mm,
boys, are mislabeled as intellectually
mhm,
unintelligent, or predisposed to certain mental illnesses. That's not the case. You need to understand the
mhm,
dynamics that we are coming from. But that's another segue that I can get off, and I've already taken
mhm.
up more of your time than I wanted to. Please forgive me. Please forgive me for that.
You are fine.
I want to go ahead and ask you my random question, and then I'm going to
Okay.
trouble you to tell people how they connect with you if they're in the Richmond, Virginia area and need some services. I think you provide some other things that I didn't get into today, so you can tell us about that.
Yes.
But let me do the random question. Another thing, we can get these elder generation off of their chitlins and their pickled pig's feet. We'd be good too. Let's see. Them old folks, man, I'm telling you. Let's see what we got. Should you put your socks on first or your pants?
I put my socks on first.
I told you it was random. It was random.
Yes.
You put your socks on first. So if there was a fire, you're gonna have your socks on, and okay.
Yes.
All right, no problem. Well, I guess because then you don't wrinkle your pants when you, I guess, okay. I guess that works. You don't wrinkle your pants out. Okay. All right. So, dear Mr.
Mhm.
Davenport, if we're in the Richmond area or anything else, how do we connect with you? How, just give me the whole spiel.
So my email is Dana Davenport LPC, all one word, at gmail.com. And my practice line is 757-470-7699. And then there's my website, which is betterdaybetterinc.com. So all those have access as far as how to reach me. And counseling services, also consult, and I do referrals as well. So if a person comes to me in need of services I can't provide, I will find them a therapist.
Awesome, 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 awesome. So one more time before I go, still no luck with me getting the lowdown on Go Mob, what that means.
No.
I tried. Oh, well, dear. Well, I have so enjoyed my conversation. Like I said, the work that you do is near and dear to my heart, especially when it, comes to my folks, my people, your cousins on your mama's side, as I like to say. It's just amazing work that you're doing. Kudos, the claps, and I just appreciate it. Just wonderful work that you're doing. Keep on doing it. And thank you for making time for me today.
Thank you.
That is all for this week's episode of The Male Perspective. I'm your host, Lana Reid, and I will see everybody next time.